showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close-Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Maureen Santora. Maureen has been a powerful and tireless advocate for education her entire life. She says when you remove parents from the equation, children will not receive a good education. Maureen believes parents are the primary educators of their children. They have the right to be involved. They have a right to question and to empower themselves to be actively involved in their kids' education. She also says shame on anybody in education who denies that. It's outrageous. Maureen knows this firsthand. She's been a teacher since 1967. She and her husband, former New York firefighter Chief Al Santora, created the Christopher Santora Educational Scholarship Fund in honor of their son, Christopher Santora, who was also a teacher and a firefighter. He was lost on 9/11. The scholarship is awarded more than $500,000 in scholarships to New York City's elementary, middle school, and high school students. Maureen truly believes what's missing from education today is the humanity. Education has eliminated the aha moments, the opportunities for a teacher to capitalize on a child's interest and expand that interest in whatever the topic may be. Now, when you became a teacher, you were not only supposed to be a master at the subjects, but you were also supposed to be somebody that was going to help kids love to learn. It's not just about the core subjects. It's about empowering students to chart their own path through their education and do what lights them up. Maureen has a great respect for teachers. She says teachers are never included in any of the administrative conversations when decisions are made. And teachers work extremely hard. They work after hours, too. They do their best to accommodate the needs of kids. Most good teachers want parent involvement as well. They want a partnership. Maureen says, let's have that conversation. We are your best advocates. Now, to learn more about Maureen's mission to turn this all around, more about the Christopher Santora Educational Scholarship Fund, and about some wonderful books that she's written as well, Maureen joins us here in the Close-Up Television studios for this exclusive interview. Maureen, so wonderful to see you again. We have such a wonderful relationship with you here at Close-Up Television. We've done radio shows with you. We actually did a wonderful segment, too, on location with you and your husband, Al, at the 9/11 Memorial, which was very beautiful, and that was in tribute to your son, Christopher Santora. And we're going to talk about that during the course of our conversation. But welcome back. It's so good to see you again.
Oh, it's wonderful seeing you again, Jim. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
You're such a great advocate for people in general, which I love about you, Maureen. And you've really taken on this incredible mission of being an advocate for education. And it's not that just all of a sudden you picked this out of a hat. I mean, you've been an educator since 1967 yourself. So you walk the walk, talk the talk. You could easily be retired and, visiting Acapulco and having your feet in the sand with Al about now. But you really have this yearning and burning inside you to try to help in some way to be this advocate that comes up with brilliant ideas to help the educational system sort of get out of this rut that they seem to be in right now. Tell us a little bit about that, and of course, what is it about being an advocate for you that really speaks to you? Why is it so important?
Well, I'm going to answer that question first. I believe that everybody on this earth has a road.
Yeah.
And I believe that we need to speak out. We need to make noise when we see things going in the wrong direction.
Right.
And if we don't, then we're complicit in letting everything fall apart.
Right.
So I'm a tiny voice, but I'm a voice that is persistent. And I believe that the educational system that we currently have is going down the wrong path. I look at my grandchildren and I see what they're learning compared to what was being taught years ago, and it's very disturbing to me. Parents are, the family structure has changed over the years, where you had two-parent households and you had mothers staying at home, and now you have both parents working, or you have more single families, mothers and fathers raising their children, grandparents raising their children. And so the structure has changed, but the parents are the primary educators of their children, and they will always be that. And their values, their morals, their expectations for their children are the things that form a child.
Right.
The support they get. A child gets support from his parents going to, science fairs or auditorium, plays, and it's very, very important to the child and his development, knowing that he is supported and he is loved and he is somebody who has great value. So they're the primary educators. Their parents lend their children to the school system to teach them all the finer points that will enable them to be successful in life, in the job market, and specifically in the job market. But we are heading down a path where the academics are now being tainted by political movements and equity and equality. And I believe everybody is equal. I believe everybody has value. I believe everybody matters.
Right.
And I think everybody should have the same rights to a good education as, but you have to fight for that.
Yeah, right.
And if that's not happening in your school, you as a parent must stand up and say, why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? What is happening here? How can we make this better? How can we work together? How can we partner together? You need to be the one. You can't let your neighbor do that.
Yes.
Because it's your child.
Right.
And it's your child that matters to you. So those are things that I think we need to instill the flame in the parents to stand up and say, yes, I am able to do this. This is for my child. I want my child to get the best education possible.
You've been doing this since 1967 as an educator. What first inspired you to go into teaching back then?
Well, I had a mother who was a teacher, and in fact, my mother was a special education teacher in the early days before special ed, flew off the shelf, so to speak. And she worked with the cerebral palsy population, and I was a good student in school. I was obedient. I didn't talk out of turn. But I didn't like school at all, at all. And when I went to college, I majored in psychology, and I wanted to be a child psychologist. And I minored in education. And when I graduated, I thought it would be prudent for me to figure out whether or not I liked being with kids. So I went into teaching, and I fell in love with the job. Yeah. And so my career path changed. And I never left the teaching. I, did a variety of things as, a teacher and a staff developer, and I did other things as well besides being solely in the classroom. But I was in the classroom for over 25 years, and I loved being with the kids. They energized me, they challenged me, they gave me great inspiration. I'm still in touch with many of them after all these years. They're married, they have their kids, but they still contact me. Wow. And it's a wonderful tribute, to a wonderful life of having been a teacher.
It means you made a difference. It means you really impacted their lives. All these years later, they still stay in touch, and they want to tell you about the exciting things in their life.
That's right.
Which is an honor for you.
Yeah, and I was just very delighted to have the privilege of being around these young people who have turned out to be wonderful adults, and it's...
but it's changed a lot since 1967, right?
Yes.
And decades after. What are some of those changes? You alluded to a little bit about the changes of the home structure, and what are some of the things that are different and changed? And would you say that you know, the advent of the computers in the home, and everybody has a computer, and all the cell phones and all this, you know, technology advancements, which are fantastic, but still they've come into the classroom. I remember when we were kids, we couldn't even bring a calculator. We had to really figure out what that math problem was. Maybe there was an abacus still there, but the calculator, no. It helps, but yet can be, you know, not so much a help as well. Plus, this 24/7 lifestyle of everybody's out working, everybody has to, you know, bring in the bacon sort of thought process. How has all of, and even social media, how has all of this come into play?
Well, I think that is a very, very important element, and you know, I'll discuss that in a couple of minutes. But I think too, you know, in early education, kids did the grunge work.
Yeah.
They memorized the times tables. They knew the division facts. They, you know, had vocabulary tests. They had spelling tests. They had things that, you know, enabled them to become serious thinkers.
Right.
You know, we did critical thinking in the classroom, and that's not the same as critical race theory, but it is an avenue with which you present a problem and find as many possible solutions as possible, so that you learn as you develop as into an adult, that there are many ways to solve the same problem.
Right.
There's not only one way.
Right.
That has not been taught in the schools for a very long time, and it needs to be started in the kindergarten or the pre-K. Now we have pre-Ks, for kids to be able to know that there are many, many ways to solve a problem. Now they're doing it somewhat in math currently, where, you know, there are 15 ways to solve a problem, and it becomes so burdening to kids that they never learn the math.
Right.
You know what I mean? Math is
Right.
not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual thinking and presenting problems. And, you know, on every level, there are problems that can be presented, you know, that are age appropriate.
Right.
That needs to be developed. The fact that, you know, years ago, you had much larger classes. You had parents who supported teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers were not the enemy. Teachers were the resource.
Right.
Teachers were the person that parents had a chance to, you know, go to and ask, you know, if they needed help in a certain subject area or anything, actually, you know. That no longer is true. And I definitely think that the computer age has stifled imagination and creativity, and it has presented an easy way out. But you don't learn through the easy way out.
Right.
You learn through the hard way.
Right.
And if you want to become a lifetime learner, you have to learn the basics before you can learn the advanced skills.
Right.
You know, and Googling information is not doing
Which is
research.
what everybody does now.
And everybody does that.
Yeah.
You know, and you hope that what you've Googled is accurate, but how do you know? If you haven't gone to the library and you haven't done the first source, you know, references, and you haven't seen the actual text, how do you know that what you've Googled is accurate?
Is accurate, right.
But everybody just assumes, you know?
Right.
And TikTok and all these other, you know, places where people get all this information is not teaching you to be a critical thinker.
Right. Right, exactly. So what are some of the other things that are happening in the structure of education now that's not really helping kids in the long run? You've outlined a few of them now, which are critical. What are some other things that are happening?
Well, I think, you know, the one size fits all is the bad plan.
Right.
You know, that everybody now teaches reading at 8:15.
Right.
And teaches, math at 1:30. They have the same plan for every single student in every single school, teaching in at the same time. And now in different schools you have different books, so they have different, assignments.
Right.
But everybody in the same school teaches the same subject at the same time.
Right.
And that stifles creativity and imagination.
Because each child you know, comes at it differently? Each one
Well,
is unique?
it's not only that, but you know, for a teacher, the beauty and skill of teaching is reaching every type of learner.
Right.
So you have auditory, you have you know, visual, you have kinesthetic learners, you know, who all learn in a different way.
Yeah.
And if you're a master at your craft, you find out right in September what kind of learners your students are.
Yeah.
And so for the visual learners, you do a lot of visual things to help them kind of cement the learning. For the kinesthetic learners, you have to do the hands-on.
Right.
Now, the visual learner may not need that, but the kinesthetic learner, that's how they learn.
That's how they learn.
So you need to be skilled enough to know that.
Right.
But if you teach the same thing at the same time,
To everybody, right.
it doesn't necessarily incorporate all these different types of learning. And so you are eliminating a lot of knowledge for every student.
Right.
Because, you know, maybe your math lesson is more kinesthetic, but your auditory learner may not need that.
Right.
You know, and so you need to be able to tailor make what the kids are learning. But if you're a good teacher, you know that.
Yes.
And you know that, and you know the students that are very good in reading, and you know the students that are very good in math, but you also know the students that are struggling in both of them, and you need to give them support. So you don't want the very good math student to be sitting for 15 minutes while the struggling student is trying to catch on.
Right.
You want to provide, but that's the skill and the benefit of being a good teacher. You know that, you see that, you're able to group the kids in those kinds of groups so that they will help each other and assist each other. And you don't always have to put the top student with the bottom student.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily benefit the top student, and it sometimes doesn't benefit the bottom student either. So you need to mix things up. You can't do that anymore. You have to teach in this one pattern, one form, which is, I think, very detrimental.
Are we in a society too, not just even in education, but as a whole, where everybody gets a gold star? Everybody's a hero, everybody's terrific, and that's not necessarily the case, because when you give everybody the gold star, even if they haven't earned it, just to make them feel good, that's not going to be great down the line.
Well, the gold star is meaningless. It's meaningless. It means nothing. If everybody is getting a prize, the prizes mean nothing.
Right.
And you know, in real life, when all of these kids go to work, there are top dogs and middle dogs and bottom dogs. And so you don't always get the prize in the workplace because you think you should.
Right.
You have to earn it.
Like an entitlement.
That's correct.
We're seeing a lot of that
now
in
yes.
society.
Well, I mean, in sports, you know, in children's sports, everybody got a prize.
Yeah, all got a trophy.
You know what I
whatever,
mean? And so what you taught them was that the game was fun and the game was wonderful, but if you wanted to win, it wasn't as important because you were going to get a prize if you
no matter
lost.
What. Right.
You know, and we now have a group of adults that can't accept defeat.
Oh, sure.
They can't. And they always feel that they're going to win out if they make enough noise and they scream and yell and holler enough. And
I can give you a few names, but I won't hear. Just a few names.
But I mean, it's very sad. And you have professional sports people who do this as well, that they always think they need to be in the shining light, and they don't necessarily deserve it.
Yeah, that's,
But real life is that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose.
Exactly.
And if you don't learn how to lose, I used to tell my grandchildren when we would teach them how to play cards, you know, fish and all this.
Yeah.
I said to them, if you can't be willing to lose, you can't play with Grandma.
Right.
Because you have to be willing to lose. And I'm not going to teach you to win all the time.
Right.
I'm going to teach you how to play the game.
And don't be a sore loser either if you lose.
That's correct. And so if you're not old enough to learn how to be graceful in losing and saying, gee, that was a good game, I had a good time, but you did a better job than me, and next time maybe I'll win.
I'll try to practice or work on my two.
And I taught how to play checkers, and they are fantastic in checkers because I never let them win.
Right.
They had to win because
had
they
to
earned
figure
it.
Out. Right.
They earned it. And so, they now say, when I play with my friends, Grandma, I really can beat them because I told them all the moves that they needed to have. But they didn't win all the time.
Yeah.
They didn't win. And I think that that's a skill that everybody, no matter what you are in life, everybody must have.
I remember too when going to school, there was something you touched upon earlier that I'd love to expand on, and that is the sort of the respect for authority in a way too, that has really dissolved.
Yes.
Even sometimes where the kids don't even respect their own parents. And I do remember where there was just this unspoken rule that you had respect for the teachers and the principal and the staff, and that the parents backed that up. The parents, like you said, looked at the teacher as almost an extension of the learning experience, that they were there as an advocate for the child, and that they were there to not just provide a service, but they were all on the same page, the parents and the teachers. But now, you see a lot of situations where if the teacher says anything, and it might be right, it might be helpful for that child,
Right.
but if the teacher says anything that upsets the cart, the parent goes running down to the school and, how dare you say that to my kid, or how dare you suggest that, or almost as if the parent is going after the teacher now.
Right.
The teacher, like you said, is the enemy. When I don't think that that's the way, I know when I was a kid, it was thought about. If the teacher said something and the parent found out about it, you had to solve that as the kid quick for the parent and the teacher. And they were usually always right with that, what they were suggesting. But now, if anything's brought up to a parent, not all, but some react in this way of, how dare you say anything about my kid? My kid is ideal and perfect. My kid makes no mistakes. My kid did not pull her hair or do anything.
Well,
That's changed.
That goes back to the everybody wins philosophy, That goes back to that. And if you have a good relationship and a good communication with the parents as a teacher, those things don't happen. Because I had a little boy, I'll tell you a true story. I had a little boy who was learning karate, and he would kick everybody in the class. And one day he leaned forward, and I put my hand out, and I touched his head and part of his hair, and I stopped him. And his mother came up, and she was very, very angry at me. Oh, no, she expected me to deny it. Did you touch my child? And I said, I absolutely did, and I'll tell you why I did. He has kicked everybody in this classroom. And if somebody tried to kick your child, I would do the same thing.
Right.
And she stopped dead in her tracks because she expected me to say, no, I didn't touch, your child. But I wanted her to know. I said, your son is learning karate, and you need to tell him that the classroom is not the karate place.
Right.
That the karate school is the karate school, and the classroom is the classroom. And if somebody else touched your child, I would do the same thing to protect your child.
Right.
And so we became very, very good friends.
That's terrific.
But I was not going to lie, and I certainly was not going. I didn't hit the kid, and I didn't. But I stopped him as he leaned forward, and so his head, kind of hit, my hand.
Was he going to give you a karate chop or something?
You know what I mean? But he stopped, what I mean? But he used to go and he kicked everybody. And, the other parents complained about it because he was out in the yard and he was at lunch and, and we happened to be walking in the hallway. But I felt, and I said to her, my job is to keep everybody safe.
Right.
And to prevent anybody from getting harmed. So if your child is not able to obey the rules, then we have to have some kind of action plan so that he'll learn that this is what's important.
Exactly.
And we became very, very good friends,
she
the mother and I. And
understood.
years later, we were still friends, and he was in high school, and he had turned out okay. But I think, if you have a good communication, then the parent comes to you first.
Right.
You know, and that's where all these machines negate the good communication.
Yes.
Because if you're texting, your voice, your manner, your speech are not imparted
It's not the
on the
same.
text.
Right.
It's a straightforward
Just-
reading lesson.
Yeah, yeah.
So you don't get the same manner. And you know, the fact that, you know, if you want to create a good child, you have to acknowledge your child's flaws.
Right.
Just like if you want to become a good adult, you have to acknowledge your flaws and your weaknesses and work on them.
Exactly right.
But as a parent, your job is to create good human beings. And sometimes those good human beings do things that are not so good, and you need to call them out on it. And you don't need to beat them, and you certainly don't need to punish them unnecessarily, but you need to call them out on it, and you need to explain to them that this is not the way they're going to be successful in life.
Are parents generally as engaged as they used to be?
I don't think so. And I don't think so for a variety of reasons. You know, when you're working, you know, 9 to 5, and you're coming home and you're making dinner and you're busy and your child is, finished with his homework, you don't necessarily check it because he said he's finished.
Right.
Okay, and you know, if you're out at meetings or you have, you know, other engagements, you know, your children are not the priority, and they need to be the priority.
Right.
And no matter what happens in your life, your child needs to know that you care. So you check the homework. You write a note to the teacher if there's something he doesn't understand. Johnny didn't understand how to do this math problem. Will you reteach it to him? Will you help him out? Or can I call you and you can tell me how I can help him?
Right.
You know what I mean? But again, you know, the face-to-face and the auditory communication, which we don't have anymore, you know, has caused a big change, a big change.
So what are some things we can do to fix this? And is it a fixable issue? Are there things, I know as an advocate, you're coming up all the time with different ideas and strategies to try to help, but does it ever fall on deaf ears? Are they so entrenched now in this newer way of doing it that it's falling on deaf ears at all?
Well, I think sometimes, you know, this new trend is simpler. And simpler is always considered better, but it's not always, you know. When I was a teacher, we used to have monthly lunch meetings. And I'd give up my lunch, and I'd invite any parent that wanted to come, and we would talk. And that went on for a very long time. I don't know whether that's even possible anymore, but it's something that could be done. The schools in New York have now begun to, in the last several years, have like a September welcome back to school where the parents come and they learn about what the curriculum is for the year. But that's not enough. You can't do that only once. You can't have parent-teacher conferences twice a year and expect to get the kind of feedback. I always remember, you know, my children believed me because if I said to them, I'm going to call your mother, I would call the mother.
Yeah.
I only had to do that to 1 or 2 students, and then the word got out.
Yeah.
Well, Mrs. Santora follows through on her word.
Right.
And so I was very careful about threatening to do that. And I would not call, you know, at 3 o'clock. I would call at 8:30. And the mother would get on the phone, and usually the next day, whatever the problem was corrected. It was corrected because the mother didn't want to get a call from me. And I always said to them, I would send out a letter and I would send, these are the times that I'm available. And if you really need to speak to me because you work full time, contact me and I will call you at whatever time is necessary. And I would do that. Now, I didn't get calls throughout every single day and every month, but I did get calls from parents. And so I think, you know, it's a two-way street. If you want communication, you have to be a communicator. You know what I mean? And you have to be receptive to getting the communication, you know? And I think that, teachers do a lot. They spend a lot of money in their classrooms,
Oh, yes.
much
Sometimes
more than they ever get.
buying their own supplies.
I did
and
that
everything.
for years. When I went back to teaching, I said to my husband, "You're going to have to give me $1,000 every year just to buy the materials that I feel I need for the classroom that are not there." And that was our agreement, and I did that for many, many, many years.
Why is that
books.
the case? How come a lot of
Well,
people don't know
because
that the teachers have to spend
they have
that?
no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
How come those funds aren't there in place?
Well, it depends upon the school, and it depends upon the principal. And now the principals are in charge of the entire budget.
Yeah.
So depending upon,
What
in
they
the
allot
school that
for.
I worked, if I needed paper, I remember having to buy a case of chalk because they would not give out chalk. Now I had a blackboard. They now have a smart board, so
Yeah,
it's
now
different.
it's
But
all-
I had a
but
blackboard,
then you had the
and I
chalk
couldn't
and-
buy. I had to buy special Board of Education chalk, so I
the
bought
chalk.
a case. I had chalk for 20 years.
I used to help the teacher by cleaning the erasers.
Yeah.
We would go down to where the
Yes,
janitor is
yes,
and clean the erasers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, those things should never have happened.
Right.
But they did. So
Right.
you, as a professional, felt it was necessary to have these materials, and most teachers do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I was in special education, I gave every child a birthday party
Yeah.
because they didn't have that at home.
Now I don't even think they can do that.
Well,
right?
they
Or
now,
they don't.
they don't do any of
anything.
that. But
Yeah.
that
no
was
holiday trees,
Yeah.
Christmas trees. It's
Oh,
all gone.
I mean,
yeah.
and those things create the sense of community.
We used to love all that stuff.
Oh, kids love
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
And I have all the things my kids ever made. I laminated them and I have them and I took them out. I take them out for the holidays and they say, "Gee, Ma, you still have that?" Yeah, I have it. But that was what I felt. I wanted my children to know that what they did was very important.
It was of value, right?
And you can always have 10 minutes in your day, no matter how busy you are, to sit down and say, "How was your day today? What subject did you have a problem with? What subject did you like? What lesson do you thought?" And with little kids especially, you have to be very specific. You can't say, "What did you do today?" because the child will say nothing.
Right.
So you have to say, "Well, did you have art today? Did you, have gym today? Did you learn something new in math?" And be very, very specific. And kids will answer you and they'll tell you
Right.
what. But you have it 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It doesn't need to take hours. But that engagement
It engaged,
lets
right.
the child know, number one, that you're watching
Yeah.
to make sure he's doing okay. And number two, that you care about what he's doing.
Yeah.
And
remember.
that's the core.
And that's the core. I remember
That's the
when we
core.
were kids, my father would cut off clipping from the rhododendron bush, and we'd wrap it in the tin foil, and we'd bring it in. We'd one for the bus driver,
Oh, right, yes.
and one for the teacher. Just
right.
there was that warmth. There's just
That's
that
right.
camaraderie, and between the parent to bring this to the teacher, and I don't even know if that's really happening now.
Well,
anymore.
it's the gratitude.
I'm sure you got a lot of rhododendrons.
But it's the thank you and the gratitude, and that's, everybody needs that.
Right.
Parents need that. If you speak to your child in a disrespectful manner, he's going to speak to you in a disrespectful manner.
Yeah.
And he's going to speak to his teacher in a disrespectful manner. So you need to
Exactly
be
right.
very careful the way you speak to your
way-
child.
right.
Because if you want your child to be respectful, you have to be respectful yourself.
So it really does start at home.
Absolutely.
It starts at home.
Absolutely.
And, there are situations where it's a troubled home, or like you say, it's a one-parent situation, or, the parents. See, today, now I remember that you mentioned Google. You can just Google anything. So, if there's certain things that the teacher or the parent would rather not have the kids see at 6 years old,
Right.
You wouldn't see it. You just didn't. You were outside playing. You were being a
Right.
kid. You were living. You didn't know about some of the things that were going on that were the adult situations because you were a kid. In time, you would learn about that. But now kids can go on Google. If the parent doesn't want to share that quite yet,
Right.
or the teacher says it's not of the time yet, they can go upstairs in their bedroom, and in the inside of their room is like NASA,
That's
and
right.
they can find everything about everything really early.
That's right.
Even way earlier than they would even understand it. that too, that almost overload of information and access sort of comes into it and kind of sort of almost thwarts what the structure the parent and the teacher, I think, is trying to create. Like in due time, there's a process to it all.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that overloads the kids too, right?
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of that, again, is parents can monitor to make sure, and they should do that. I was never a person who didn't trust my children,
Right.
but I checked.
Right.
I
Sure.
did. I
Yeah.
checked.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the mother who my kids would say, you know, I hate you, Mom. And I would say, well, you lucked out and you got me as your mother, but you're not going.
Right.
And you're not doing this.
Yes.
And I don't care how many tantrums or yells you have, this is not happening and you're not going. And years later, when they became parents, they said, thank you, Mom.
They understood the
Thank
reasoning.
you. They understood. I didn't understand at the time, but I was able to take
Yeah.
the, you know,
Yeah.
the heat, so to
Yeah.
speak,
Right.
and, you know, because I felt that, you know, there was a certain time and a certain place, and there were things that you shouldn't be doing if you were not the right age.
Right.
If you were not the right age. And I you know, today everybody is growing up much too fast.
Oh, sure. The
Much too
kids are
fast.
like
and
many adults now.
kids are not, you know, they don't believe in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny
Early
after,
on,
you know. You know, my kids were like 8 or 9 before they, you know, even considered questioning that. But kids at 5 or 6 say, "Oh, you know, that's not true."
Early,
But those
yeah.
magical things
That- yeah.
create a wonderful imagination.
Fantasy and daydreaming.
Daydreaming
And that's been eliminated. I've talked about that elsewhere too, about that, you know, being in the creative arts as I am, and television and radio and all, that being able to brainstorm and fantasize and daydream leads to incredible creativity, but a lot of that is being done for you technologically.
Correct. Yes.
Or if you're even allowed to even do it anymore at all,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a passé thing to take a moment to breathe and fantasize and daydream about something. And I think that led to a lot of my aspirations and led to a lot of the things that I went towards, was because of things that I was thinking about and dreaming about and daydreaming about in advance, sort of creating the plan.
Right.
And a lot of that's been sort of taken out of the whole, you know, realm.
Well, everybody needs dreams.
Sure.
And everybody needs imagination. And if you don't have those, you're a sad person.
Yeah,
You- you
fosters
just-
creativity.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? If you can daydream, you know, or fantasize in a moment of, you know, terror, or you get through.
Yes.
You get through.
Right.
You know, when you don't have that, you know, it's very hard. It's very, very hard, you know. And so I think those are things that everybody can do. The pretend games that we
Right.
used to play as kids.
Sure.
We pretended, you know, they cowboys and Indians or princesses or, you know, villains or whatever, and you would pretend and you'd dress up and you'd make a costume or whatever. Those are great things to do. And I think every kid should have that as an
Yeah,
experience.
a lot of that's been eliminated
You
as
know,
well now.
and that's been
yeah.
eliminated, and that's been eliminated in the kindergartens in particular. We used to have what was called, they called it a playtime.
Right.
And now, you know, you have to learn. Well, kids need both.
You have to have that.
They need
yeah.
both. They need both. Now, you don't need
It's like the recess
100% of
time,
one,
right,
but you know,
right.
you need both.
Right.
And kids are smarter today than they were, you know, academically, because they start school earlier.
Right.
You know what I mean? They start school earlier. But I just feel that
But the social development too has been
That's-
really
yeah,
affected,
yes.
like because that they have started earlier maybe, and because everything is in the cell phone and
That's
all the
correct,
social
yes.
media and all these
you
other
don't
avenues.
need your friends.
That when it comes to like having a communication with somebody, sometimes they don't even know what to say.
That's right.
Or maybe one-word answers, and they're not smiling and they're looking away, and it's like, wow, they weren't taught communication. And that's why, like you say, the playtime, the recess, yeah, they're tossing the ball around and they're on the swings, but it's also dealing with other personalities and behaviors
that's
and
right,
sort of
that's right.
that's as important as the 2 + 2 is 4, that well-rounded
That's correct.
part of it,
That's
right?
right, that's right.
Because you see a lot of people struggling with the ability to even be able to deal with one another, and then as they become adults, they act out as if they were still a child.
That's right.
Because they didn't learn to be able to communicate, and that everybody's different and we have different ways to approach things, and let's sort of come together.
And there are many ways to solve a problem, you know what I mean, which goes into that critical thinking that we were talking about before. And another thing that disturbs me is that if you are in a minority opinion, you're now not only wrong, but you're bad.
Oh, right, you're the enemy.
See,
you're the enemy.
You're an enemy.
Right.
So that was never
that
true
was
before.
Not before. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could be on the other side and people would tolerate you and say, well, I'll agree to disagree.
Right.
But you are not a bad
you
person.
are not, like, banished.
Now you are classified as a bad person if you're
Yeah.
not the majority opinion. And that is really deadly, in my opinion. That
Unhealthy,
will
yeah.
create just terrible animosity, anger, hostility,
We see it playing out.
violence,
We see it playing
everything, you
out.
know. And, you know, you went ahead of me in the line, well, I'm going to knock you down because
Right.
you did. I mean, that kind of thing
Yeah,
is
the
just,
road rage. And,
you know, just
it's all being acted out.
unforgivable, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unforgivable.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't understand why we are such an angry country at the moment, but we are a very angry country.
Yeah,
And the ability, when my children, my grandchildren, they're the ones that have all these machines, you know, when they sit down and eat with me at dinner, they can't use their cell phones.
Right.
And that's a rule I have. Now, when they're in their own house and their mothers allow them to do that, well, I'm not in charge. But in my house,
Right.
I say the reason you're sitting with us is so we have a conversation. And so they all engage. You know, last night, you know, my daughter came over with her two sons, and I had another grandson over as well. And they had the most wonderful conversation because they're used to now.
They're used to.
They don't have their cell phones. They're not allowed to use them or bring them to the table. And that was just a rule that I made because I said, if you want to use your cell phone, you don't need to eat dinner with me.
Right.
You can sit in the living room or sit wherever, you know,
Right.
but I'm
Yeah.
eating with you so that I can talk to you
Right.
and see you. And
Right.
so we now have these heated debates, you know, because they're not always on the same page. But I want them to learn
Yeah.
that you can debate with somebody and you can have opposing views, and both views are correct for the individual
for the
people that
individual.
believe them.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Yeah.
and
We've
sometimes
lost some of that. Yeah.
you know we don't have the tolerance anymore for debates. You know, I don't even know if there are any more debate teams because somebody probably would be shot. Who knows? But
Yeah.
you know,
I used to be the president of mine
You
at
know.
LIU in New York.
Yeah.
I was president. It was a great thing. It was a great development of skill, and the other person would have an opposing
That's-
view, or you'd have to speak extemporaneously or whatever. And it was just a great way to develop the communication because sometimes people will throw things at you that you didn't even plan for.
That's
and then you
right.
have to quickly think on your feet and react to it in a way that's logical and still creative and maybe persuasive.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean you want to cut the person down.
That's right.
You just want to maybe present a different side of something.
Right.
We seem to be losing so much of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you see it in the schools too.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, you do because you don't have the opportunity to do these things, and you know, current events is no longer something that's done.
right.
You know, just basic things
Things.
that would bring up discussions.
Right.
You know, that would foster communication, that
Right.
would bring up differences of opinion,
Yeah.
and do so in a civil way.
Civil is the key.
You know,
yeah,
civil way.
respectful, civil.
That's right. You know, so
That is-
those kinds of things are very sad. You know, to see.
And it's really impacting teachers as well as the students because they're losing teachers, aren't they?
Yes. Many teachers, you know, like of my generation, stayed until they were retirement age. And those that didn't have children worked close to 40 years.
Yes, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
They were 40 years, and that's a long time. But today, you don't have that.
Yeah.
And there's the attitude that instead of working to make the system better, you have kind of followed the union's path, that they're the good all and end all and be all. And I don't think they are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I really believe that the unions across the country should be the group that's involved, not only solely, but, involved in weeding out those who shouldn't be there.
Right.
And that's a very tough thing to put, because you're a union, you're supporting the teachers, you're doing, but at the same time, if you are interested in education and you are interested in good teaching, then you get rid of those who should not be in the classroom.
Right.
And there are many who are not suited to be in the classroom. I've worked with many. And once you're tenured, in New York City anyway, you're in for life.
That's it. You're good to go.
It's very, 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 very difficult to get rid of a teacher who is a tenured teacher. So, having, assessments, like we talked about earlier.
Yes, right.
Not making them the only reason that you are staying, but having an assessment, but having, them be part of the total package is something that the unions should have been at the forefront for.
Right.
And they were not.
They were not.
They were not. And I fault them for that, and I have been, I used to, when I was a staff developer, and we had several brand new teachers who had no management skills whatsoever, none whatsoever. Their classrooms were,
Just
everybody
all
was
over the
just,
place,
and I would come in and I would say, sit down. Everybody sat down, fold your hands, everybody folded in. They'd say, well, how do you do that? I said, well, I'm the teacher and I'm in charge. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm the boss.
Right.
I'm the one with all the cards. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And I'm in charge, and these are the people that I'm hoping to, educate to become better and smarter than they were before they had me. So, but in any case, I would say to them, they had no management skills, and they were not people that were really interested in the kids.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I would say to them, and I probably shouldn't, but I did anyway, would say to them, I think you should find another profession, because you're not happy in this profession. You're overwhelmed with what's going on.
Yeah.
Things are not getting better for you. You're not listening to what people are telling you to do. And maybe there's another profession that's less stressful.
Yeah.
And some of them heeded my suggestion and others did not.
Yeah.
And then they became tenured. So then now they're perpetuating,
Yeah.
the bad education of, having mayhem. There has to be order in a classroom in order for
Yes.
teaching to occur.
Right.
And that's just a fact. And if you have, another thing I think that has happened in the education system that is very detrimental is that every once in a while in a classroom you have a student or a couple of students who have great difficulty being in a class with large numbers of kids. They need to be in a smaller class setting.
Right.
Sometimes it's because of academic failures, sometimes it's for other reasons. But these are kids that do great harm to the rest of the class because they can't sustain being in this very large group.
Right.
They should be removed.
Yeah.
And the principals, assistant principals, the support staff should do everything they can to find a place for these kids in spite of the parents' objections.
Right. Right.
Because if the parents are interested in their children, and these are children, I'm not talking about somebody who's just a badly behaved kid. I'm talking about kids who really have great struggles. But if the parent is interested in their child, they will give the support they need so that they will either overcome, outgrow, or emerge as a different person.
Right.
And that should be everybody's aim.
Right.
That should be everybody's aim.
Right.
So sometimes these kids stay in a classroom for an entire year, and they're very, very destructive, not only to the teacher, but to the fellow students who are trying to learn and trying to do the right thing. And the teacher's hands are tied because the other departments, the support team, the assistant principals, are not actively trying to find a better placement for this kid. So those are things that can be done, and parents can advocate for that. Now, most parents who have children who have special needs are very, very protective of their kids, and so they should be. And so they should be.
Yeah.
However, they need to know that there are places for their child to excel, to be loved,
Yes.
to be comforted,
Yeah.
to be successful. And you have to win over those parents, and you have to help them to understand that it's not a punishment to be in a different setting, but it is an avenue to help the child succeed.
I remember a case with a friend that was a school teacher, English, I think it was 8th grade, in special ed. And she was telling me about this tremendous struggle. I mean, she took this on personally. I mean, she wasn't sleeping, she wasn't eating because of the scenario that this kid was in, 8th grade. The family originally came from Ecuador, and he was in school in a well-to-do community in Connecticut. And the scenario was that this kid was very popular, and he was funny, and he was warm, and personality-wise, he was like rock solid. He was a great kid. But he was just so jovial and happy, he just wouldn't do the work. He wouldn't do the homework, and testing wasn't really being successful, and she just was trying everything and struggling with trying to get this kid through. And she had suggested at the end of the year, because if you're going to go by the testing and all the other stuff that the school wants, he wasn't meeting that criteria at all. Though a lovable kid, and all the other kids loved him. And so she suggested to her principal that the kid be left back, because he really didn't gain anything out of this year, and it's a crucial year, 7th, 8th grade time.
That's right.
And before he goes to 9th, we got to get him to get this. So the principal, I remember the story where the principal in this well-to-do town said, "Oh, well, no, we don't have any blemishes on our record at this school, none. And this will create a blemish, and there will be a ripple effect if that happens. And so, no, we don't agree that that student should be left back." And she was having, panic attacks and everything over it, because she really was looking out for the kid.
That's right.
And she ended up having to fight the principal back and forth. She wouldn't give in. She said, this child, as lovable as he is, got nothing out of this year, and we can't send him forward if he didn't pick up what he should have in 8th grade. And she said, I told you that we have a stellar record of nobody ever left back, and we're not going to start it now. And she just went on. So she actually called the parents and brought the parents into the scenario. And she said, this is the situation. I really don't want to, but I truly feel that your child, as lovable and fun as he is, he needs to stay back the year just to pick up on the things he didn't pick up on. And they said, really? Are you sure? And she said, yeah, I hate to do it. I'm battling, the school. The school doesn't want this to happen, because it hasn't happened supposedly before. But I really personally feel that he should stay back. So they said, you're the teacher, and whatever you think is best for our child, we're going to go with you. We're going to support you, even over the principal and the other staff. We support you. You're the teacher. You're with our child, 5 days a week, so you know what that child needs as far as the education. And he is lovable and he's fun. And then she had, the father had illustrated that, one of the reasons maybe why he's not necessarily diving into the educational part of everything is because where we come from, work is really what is valued.
Right.
So we, the parents, out working hard, doing physical work and whatever they did. He painted houses, she was a maid, whatever, you gotta work and make the money and everything, where the education isn't as celebrated. So maybe that sort of rubbed off a little bit on the kid, and he realized that, and that's why to him, it's a social thing, and he's loved in school, but he wasn't picking up on anything. So they said maybe part of our culture sort of fosters that as well. So if that's what you think, we vote for you. And she, almost had an ulcer over it, but presented it to the principal and to the, and after exhaustive, back and forth, but once the parents got involved and said, this is what we want, and we're backing the teacher, we don't care about, the school's pristine, obviously this is something positive for our kid, we want it. They agreed. They backed down.
Yeah.
And the teacher wasn't penalized or anything. She was fearful that something should be shifted or something. And they decided, okay, if you totally think, and if the parents think it's in the best interest, then that's what we're going to do. So like you talk about a lot, where a lot of times the teachers aren't brought into administrative decisions. This is the decision where she's the teacher in the school, and the administration was against her leaving it back because it reflects on the whole school that there's a blemish of somebody left back. But once the parents were contacted by the teacher and brought into the scenario, that ball of wax, that whole thing changed.
Yes.
And that's a positive, that's a great example of what you're talking about.
That's correct. That's correct. And I've had that similar situation happen in my career as well. And when the parents got involved and they became activists for their child, the administration backed down. And it was to the betterment of the child.
Right, which is the
because
bottom line.
they got another year, and that year made all the difference in the world. It made all the difference in the world. So, but again, your priorities as an educator have to be the children.
The child, right.
You know what I mean? And sometimes, when you're out of the classroom, like as an administrator, you're not looking at the individual children. You're looking at, what the superintendent is thinking about your school or whatever.
Right.
But that should never, ever, ever come to play. And that's part of the dialogue. Teachers are not included in a whole lot of things. They're just not included. And that's a shame, because teachers can solve almost any problem at all. If you sat down with a group of teachers and you said, listen, here's our challenge, we want to be able to incorporate X, Y, Z in the curriculum, and how do we do that? They would brainstorm and they would figure out a way to incorporate X, Y, Z into that, into that school day. And it would be done, in a day.
Right.
Because teachers are very resourceful and they do a lot of things with very little, and so they have great knowledge of being able to adapt very, very well.
Right.
But when you have the parents involved, it's a win-win situation.
And the teachers really need to be empowered too,
That's right.
Don't
That's
they?
right. Yes, they do, and they need. But again, the communication is absolutely key in having this. Many people say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes.
You know what I mean, and that is a very, very true statement. It's overused tremendously, But the fact of the matter is, if everybody's pushing in the same direction to make sure that the children become successful and they end up being wonderful adults. And I don't mean necessarily rich adults. I just mean your values and good people and kind and generous and
empathetic.
That's right. Everybody pushes in that direction, then it's very hard to see how that can't be a success.
And that trickles out to the rest of society.
Absolutely.
Right. Then everything,
Absolutely.
A lot of these troubles and problems we're seeing. Where kids are struggling and
continue to divide people.
Right.
You know what I mean? And in our current culture, we're either good or bad.
It's you versus them, and that's
That's right. And there's no middle road.
No,
and
the kids are seeing that.
The kids are
and
seeing
they think
that,
that's
and this
how you
is
operate.
what. That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
All the horrific things that we've seen
That's
in the
correct.
recent years, I constly keep coming back to the kids, saying the kids are watching what the adults are doing, how they're acting, what they're saying, how they're treating each other, the violence, everything, the wording. and they're going to think, oh, well, to get ahead in society, to get along, that's the only way to do it. And that's not.
And if you can cheat in some way
Yeah.
and get ahead, you're the smarter person, and the one
And
who
the one
doesn't
who's
is the
going
dope.
up the farm system
That's
and working
right.
hard.
That's
and,
right. That's right.
So how are you applying all this? These are fabulous ideas. This is terrific stuff that is so invaluable at this time because, the studies have shown that, especially in the United States, that the educational system and that the students are falling behind a lot of other countries.
Yes.
And here we are, the leader in so many other areas.
Right.
When it comes to the basic fundamentals of educating the kids, we're falling behind several other countries. How do we implement? How do we fix, tweak it? How does a Maureen Santora take all these fabulous ideas as an advocate, combining it with the years as a hands-on educator, and make positive change? What are some things you have that you're doing, that you're preparing, the presentations, lectures, speaking? What's on the docket for you to be able to turn this into reality,
Well,
what you want to see happen?
I think we have to get rid of all of the extraneous crap, in
Yeah.
our society.
Yeah.
I'm very, very much for all these enrichments and all of this,
Yeah.
but getting back to basics is what everybody needs to do. Getting back to center is what everybody needs to do.
Get off the social media.
And just have people have more common sense. Common sense is now a foreign entity
Yeah.
to many politicians, many leaders. They just lack basic common sense. And if you put in common sense, you do okay.
You do okay.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You may not be the star, but you do okay.
Right.
And things kind of even out. We're in like this big gigantic wave that's coming upon us, and we're looking around, well, where should we go? But if you had common sense, you'd get out of the water.
Right. Yeah, I watch all the time news reports or whatever, and I'm like, didn't they think not to say that, not to that? Because we're living in this land now of apology. Everybody says something on Twitter, and they have to retract it or apologize.
Right.
Well, I really didn't mean it that way. You actually did. That's why you said
Well,
it.
that's
So, and the kids are seeing that too, where they do something and then have
That's-
to apologize, whatever. Didn't you think not to do that or hit send or say that? And now the other thing too is the bullying.
Right.
And the social media
Yes.
coming in, where there's this platform to be anonymous, and that's coming into play where a lot of things are happening in social media,
That's-
threats and things. So then the kid is almost afraid to go to school, and then
Right.
the teacher can recognize that fear in the kid. That brings on a whole other realm that the
that's right.
teachers have to deal with, right?
That's right. Well, bullying is, I often said, when I was a kid, I never allowed anybody around me to be bullied because I would be the one person who would say, stop that.
Yeah, me too.
And I was smaller, and I was, but
Yeah,
everybody
just-
stopped because I was a common sense person, and people liked me, and but I was never allowed to be the silent observer to have somebody else be bullied.
Right.
And I was never good at having somebody be insulted
Yeah.
or ridiculed without me saying something.
Right.
That's not nice. Don't say that.
Right.
Don't do that around me. If
Right.
you want to do that when I'm not around, I have no control over that.
Right.
But when I'm around, don't do that
Don't,
around me.
right.
And so, I was respected. Now, not everybody liked that, but I was respected, and people backed off because I was never confrontational.
Right.
So I think the bullying, you need to confront that, and you need to, bullies are afraid.
Usually, yes.
They're afraid.
They've been bullied.
And
or,
so
yeah.
either they have been bullied themselves, or they don't know how to communicate, so they bully others. But you need to confront that, and you need to
Right.
be swift and
Yeah.
quick, and just I think too, that we have such fragile,
egos and
egos.
yeah,
I don't
everybody's
understand where this came
super
from.
sensitive
When my
to
son,
anything.
when my son was alive, he had nicknames for everybody. They had nicknames for him.
Yeah.
And sometimes these nicknames, when I used to say, "Oh, Chris," he said, "But everybody,
Yeah.
Well, we don't take it seriously.
It's just all
when we
part
make
of it.
fun of each other all the
Sure,
time, and
yeah.
it's okay. It's part of it. And you know, they knew he would go to bat for them,
Right.
and he knew they would go to bat for him.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was a friendship, and this
Right.
was just something they did, and they didn't take it
No.
personally.
Right.
They didn't take it.
It
Oh my
wasn't
God!
like,
Look at
"Hey,
what you
shorty," or
wounded
whatever.
me
Hey, it's just
because you
part of
make
the-
this
Right.
kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Somebody says a word, and everybody is up in
whole
arms
thing
over a word.
stops.
My goodness.
Yeah.
You know, because people make mistakes. Apologize. If you said something that wasn't nice, apologize.
Right.
Be honest and direct. If you meant to say it, say I meant to say it, and I'm sorry that you're insulted by this,
Right.
but this is my opinion.
Right.
You know what I mean? Instead of always, you know, pretending that we have to be perfect, because we're not perfect.
No. No.
And
Well,
everybody says things, you know, like in your family, sometimes you say things that are mean.
Yeah.
Well, you need to make that right.
Right.
You need to make it right. And today, everybody is, you know, you say one thing and now you're crucified for the rest of your life.
Exactly right. So then people pull in and say nothing. They don't express themselves.
They don't express, which is
isn't good either.
opposite, you
Right.
know, to what should be.
Yeah. So this is something, again, that is, you've always been an advocate since the very beginning, and you
Yeah.
still are, and you have a phenomenal message. This also plays off to what I talked about earlier, which is the Christopher Santora Scholarship, the Memorial Fund
Yeah.
that you've created. For those watching who aren't familiar with that, tell us about that and the importance of that, because that plays into this advocate for education as well.
Well, my son was a very intelligent kid. He didn't care two hoots about grades. He
Right.
just didn't.
Right.
But he was very, very smart. He had one of these memories where he would, you know, read something and then he kind of almost memorized it. So he never really had to study hard in school.
Yeah.
And his sister would be crazy because they were laboring over their work. And he'd sit and do his work and then go out to play and play basketball every day. But that was a gift he had.
Yeah.
It was a gift. Now, he could have used this gift to become, you know, a physical scientist,
Yeah.
but that's not what he wanted
Right,
to do. He
right.
wanted to be a firefighter. So that was his dream, and that's what he became. And we were very, very proud that he became a firefighter. So
And
when
his dad as well.
Yes, and I think, you know, that Al had a part of that, you know, that he
Yeah.
was, you know, firefighters are brave and strong, and Al, and Christopher liked that image,
Yeah.
you know. But he always wanted to be a firefighter. So when he became a firefighter, he was inducted in 2001 in January, or the beginning of February. And he graduated in June and worked in Engine 54. And then, of course, September 11th happened, and he was one of the 343. We needed to make sense of that.
Sure.
Now, I'll always have him in my heart.
Oh, yeah.
He's with me, and for several years I was just a total mess emotionally, and I'd cry over a song, and I still do sometimes.
Sure.
But we needed to do something to honor him. And the first thing we thought about was establishing a scholarship fund in his honor, because in spite of everything, he loved to learn.
Yeah.
He loved to learn.
Firefighter and a teacher
Yeah.
himself.
Yes, and he was a teacher, and he would have been a great teacher, you know, but, you know, American history was his forte. But so we knew that, you know, it had to be an education, and what we decided to do was establish the Christopher Santora Scholarship, and for the first 14 years, we had a big celebration, and we, you know, had a dinner dance, and we honored, you know, a countless number of students who had won our essay competition. Now, our scholarship was a little different because it was not awarded to the smartest student. It was awarded to the student who wrote most passionately on a selected topic that we had, you know,
Yeah.
put out every year. And they were all, you know, they were all history related or current events related, and we wanted the kids' opinions, and I had 5 judges for every school, and the essays were submitted anonymously, so nobody knew whether they were reading a boy or a girl, or, you know, they knew the grade because it was, you know, leveled, and we would award these scholarships. And after 14 years, it became so overwhelming that I had to stop the dinner dance. I couldn't continue.
Yeah.
But we continued the scholarship. And firefighters, have gotten scholarships, and other students have gotten scholarships from us, and we're still doing it. And we have 3 that we gave out last year, and we raise money.
Yeah.
So that's how we decide now, because
Right.
we don't have the dinner dates, but we raise, and so depending upon how much money we raise determines the scholarship. And the scholarship is an $8,000 scholarship given over 4 years, because we want the kids to complete college.
Right.
So they get $2,000 every year. If they stop after a certain time, they have to prove that they're in college, and they have to. Now we also have included not only college, but trade schools.
Trade schools
Any
as well.
kind of
Yeah.
education that would continue your lifetime learning.
Yeah.
But you have to write an essay.
You've got to write the essay.
You got to write
It's a
the essay,
beautiful
because
thing.
I'm an educator, and I
Right.
think you need to earn the
Right.
scholarship.
Right.
And most of the students that have won the scholarships from us in the past are the ones that should have won. They were not. We've had special education students win. Of course, we've had students who have gone to Yale and Harvard, but we've also had students who have gone to community colleges and then went on to a 4-year college.
Right.
And they've gone all across the United States, the kids, and they've gone into a variety of professions. And the students were very, very surprised to learn that they had won, because the only people that had the names were the schools. So we would go and we would say, well, essay number 4 won, and they would look it up, and then we would call the student down. They were always very, very happy. But after 14 years, I was not able to continue, and so we, ended up doing it, on a lower key. But
Yeah.
we're still doing it, and
Yeah.
I will do it for as long as I am able to do it, because I think, that it's now more word of mouth.
Yeah.
That people apply, and we have
Yeah.
the beginning and the end,
Sure.
they send out the question and they have to send it back, and we still have judges who are willing to judge, and
And you've given out $500,000 to $750,000
That's right.
to these
That's
students
right.
for their
That's right.
education.
Well, after September 11th, we got some money. Now, Christopher was a brand new firefighter. So when he died, he was earning $26,000 a year, half of what the firemen ordered, because
Yeah.
he was a probationary firefighter.
Right.
And the government, wanted to avoid having, the airlines go belly up, and so
Right.
they offered this September 11th fund. But we were not in the high end, Al and I.
Yeah.
I didn't care about the money. I
Right,
saw this as
right,
blood money to
right,
begin with.
right.
So whatever we got was put into the initial bank of the scholarship.
To get it going off
to
the
get it going
ground.
off the ground. And I felt, well, this is money that will honor Christopher.
Right.
This, Al and I had prepared, for retirement. It was not that you would run out and buy a boat or a new
Right,
house. Or,
right.
we were settled. We
Yeah.
were not brand new. We did not have the same needs as, the wives with the young children. So I thought this was a good way to use the money. And I can't say that I object to this.
Right.
But, with the kindness of strangers, helping and sending, we have people who
Yeah.
send us money every year and have done so for the last 20 years. And I'm so grateful to them, and I write to them and thank them. And it's just a wonderful way to help a young person.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful way to help a young person. And in spite of everything, when you go to college, nobody ever has enough money to send
No.
their child to college.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether
Right.
you're at the high end
Yeah.
or the low end.
Yeah.
Nobody has enough money. So you need to have scholarships, and you need to have, grants or whatever it is you can get. So the people that win, for whatever reason, I always think Christopher has his thumb on there. He picks people that are special in a lot of ways, and we've had some really amazing people, and they've written to me and contacted. There's one young man, he's now out of the scholarship, I'm going to say 16 years. So he has a family and he has children, and he calls us, Merry Christmas,
That's fantastic.
And it's very, very nice to hear him speak to us, and I'm glad that he hasn't forgotten.
Is this the one that's the filmmaker?
No.
It's another one.
It's another one, yeah.
Wow.
Now the filmmaker is, he got the scholarship as a middle school student, and then he went, on to the NYU school and graduated, and his dream was to become a filmmaker.
Incredible.
So, I mean,
See?
and this last election, he called me and he said, I'm running for the local election. And I said, oh, give me whatever information and, we'll pass, But, his chances, he was not affiliated with the Democratic he was an independent. He was running as an independent. So his chances were 0 to none, But his name is out there,
It's
and
out
maybe,
there.
hopefully, he'll...
Have you ever thought of running for office?
I never have, no.
Yeah.
I don't think, I would be a good candidate because I'm not able not to speak the truth.
Yeah.
And I would get into trouble.
You would be like...
I would get into trouble and say, no, this is not
play the
something
game
that's
and all
good.
that.
I can't. That's not my personality.
Just, straight
and
shooter, and this is what it is.
That's it.
Here we
and,
are.
And I've always spoken my mind,
Yeah.
and I've always, said what I think.
Which is why people respect you.
But in the political world,
That's a whole
you
other...
can't do that.
The
You have to be,
words
mum
are
is the word,
fed for you,
Yeah,
right, and
so,
just smile and,
and that's,
wave.
Yeah, and I've always been the person that has been very happy to be at the end of the line.
Yeah.
At the back. I don't need to be in the front.
right there.
I don't need to be in the front.
Pushing and shoving. There's books that you've written. I mentioned that in the introduction. You've written several wonderful books. And there is The Day the Towers Fell, the story of September 11th, 2001, and sort of like an update that's happened to this.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. That was the second book that I wrote.
Yeah.
And it's a story written for young children, emergent readers,
Yeah.
the lower elementary school, to tell the story about what happened on that day without it being a horrific, threatening, scary
yeah.
kind of, tale. My daughter Patricia, who graduated with an arts degree, and she now is, an early childhood educator because she majored in art and education, did all the pictures. So they're childlike pictures, and it's written for children. But the message of the story is that this is what hatred looks like in its purest form.
Yes.
And you as future citizens and future humans can change that
Yes.
by being kinder, more tolerant, more loving. And that's the message of the book. But it tells the story of what happened. And, in the back of the book, there is some facts for teachers or parents to read if they want to read about what actually the first day of school and the first day of elections and, how many people died and how many people, are still dying because of, So those facts are in the back of the book. But it is, it's colorful, and it's I'm very proud of this book because
Yeah.
it tells the story in a very simple, succinct way that kids can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
My first book was about Christopher, my son Christopher.
Yes.
I haven't redone that, changed that book yet, but it was, the message from that book was that Christopher was an average kid. He got into trouble. He spoke out of turn. He wasn't perfect.
Right.
But he had a dream, and his dream was to become a firefighter.
Yeah.
And he fulfilled his dream, and even though he didn't live a long life,
Yeah.
he fulfilled his dream.
Fulfilled
And
the
that
dream.
have a dream in your lifetime.
Yeah.
And no matter how long you live, if you have your dream and you fulfill your dream, you're a success.
This goes full circle to what we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier about having the ability to dream
That's
and
right.
fantasize and daydream and have
That's
something
right.
to aspire to and work towards, because we don't know how much time we have on this planet. And if we're able to achieve these dreams, it's a very beautiful thing.
It is, and it's in your lifetime, every day is special.
Yeah.
Every day is a gift. I thank God every
Yeah.
day for my gift and say, thank you. Let me
Absolutely.
do something good today.
Right.
And that's my prayer every single day. But I think we have no lock on how long we're going to live.
No.
So from all of the stupidity that people get involved in. You know, and the muck and the mire that they get involved in and entrenched in. They need to stop every once in a while and say, well, this could be my last day. Do I want to spend my last day involved with this? Hostile, angry, belligerent. You know, maybe I don't want to have that as my last day.
Because you'll be remembered that way, too.
That's right, you know. So, you know, it's something that everybody needs to be aware of, you know.
You're living your dream in ways, you know, doing the
yes.
work that you were destined to do, inspired by your mother, the teacher, and really picking up that baton and running with it, which is absolutely beautiful, Maureen. And I wish you nothing but continued success. You've always been a fighter, a survivor, a go-getter, always looking out for the underdog, and always finding ways to lift people up and empower them, which is a beautiful thing. So you're living your dream in many ways, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And I thank God. Yes. I thank God, and He's in my life a lot. And I talk to Him every day. I talk to Christopher every day, you know. And He rewards me by getting me a parking place in New York City whenever I ask. And I know that sounds crazy. It's a big plus, you know, if you are not aware of New York City, there's never any parking places. But I always get one when I ask Him, and I've been getting one for the last 20 years. But I feel that you don't know what your mission in life is sometimes. And you have to just give it up to God and let Him follow you and tell you where you should go and what you should say, and things will work out. Things will work out.
That's right. Positivity, inspiration, empowerment, a lot of what we talked about today.
Yeah.
Well, continued success.
Thank you so much,
You've certainly
Jim.
got
It's
us on your
talking
side.
to you.
It's always great to see you, Maureen, and thanks
here.
for making the trip to come to the television studio here and spending all this
It's been my
incredible
great pleasure.
time.
Wonderful.
It's always a pleasure when you're here.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Maureen Santora is truly an amazing woman, making a difference in the lives of others in such a profound and long-lasting way. Now, to learn more about her work, her book, and the Christopher Santora Educational Scholarship Fund, visit this website. For Close-Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.